Picture this. Every single woman who has ever lived has dealt with her period. Cleopatra dealt with it. Medieval peasant women dealt with it. Even cave women dealt with it. And yet, if you look at most history books, you'll find 40 pages on how the Romans built roads and basically nothing on how a Roman woman handled her period while living her actual life. So today, we're fixing that. We're going all over the ancient world to find out exactly what women used, what people believed, and some of the wildest things men actually wrote about periods throughout history. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Periods are not some modern problem that just showed up. Women have been dealing with this for as long as humans have existed. But here's what's interesting. The materials women used to handle their periods barely changed for thousands of years. What actually changed, again and again, was how society treated women while they were on their period. Some cultures thought periods were sacred, some thought they were dangerous, and which one your culture believed decided almost everything about how you were allowed to live that week. Let's start in ancient Egypt, because Egypt was ahead of pretty much everyone on this one. The Egyptians wrote one of the oldest medical documents ever found, and it actually talks about women's health. Historians believe Egyptian women used softened papyrus, basically paper, as an early version of a pad. They also likely used soft-rolled linen, the same material used for clothes, and yes, for wrapping mummies. And here's the good part. In Egypt, periods weren't seen as shameful. They were connected to fertility and to the flooding of the Nile River, which followed its own yearly cycle. Women weren't locked away or treated as dangerous. Life just continued. Now let's go to ancient Greece, home of democracy, philosophy, and also some incredibly wrong ideas about the human body. A famous philosopher named Aristotle believed period blood was basically failed sperm. His theory was that a woman's body tried to make sperm just like a man's body, but because women were colder and weaker, it came out as blood instead. This was not some random guy's opinion. This was mainstream science for centuries. Meanwhile, actual Greek women were using wool, soft wool pads, and even small rolled-up wool plugs, which were basically the world's first tampons. They also wore tight belts around the hips to hold everything in place. So you had brilliant doctors writing detailed medical notes on one hand, and a world-famous philosopher confidently explaining that women were just broken men on the other. Very Greek, very confusing. Now here's where things get genuinely ridiculous, and I promise I'm not exaggerating. The Romans had a writer named Pliny the Elder. Think of him as the ancient world's most confident know-it-all uncle at a family dinner. The one who's wrong about almost everything, but says it with total confidence. Pliny wrote that if a menstruating woman walked through a field, she could kill the crops. If she touched the sword, it would go blunt. If she came near wine, it would turn to vinegar. He even claimed period blood could scare away hailstorms and whirlwinds. Basically, ancient Rome thought a woman on her period was walking around with the powers of a low-budget weather superhero, except all her powers were bad. Meanwhile, actual Roman women were just living their lives using soft cloth, wool, or natural sea sponges, which were common around the Mediterranean. Rich women had access to soft linen and servants to wash everything. Poor women used whatever rough cloth they had. Different materials, same basic idea, everywhere. This pattern shows up across nearly every culture on Earth, just with different rules attached. In ancient Jewish law, a menstruating woman was considered ritually impure and had to go through a purification bath before returning to normal life. In some ancient Hindu texts, women on their periods were kept away from cooking and temples. Ancient Persian religious texts went even further, keeping menstruating women isolated with limited food and no contact with fire or water. In many indigenous cultures across the Americas, women stayed in special moon lodges during their period. But here's the twist. In a lot of these cultures, this wasn't punishment. It was seen as a time when a woman was at her most spiritually powerful, almost like a monthly retreat. Meanwhile, in China, traditional medicine treated the female body as its own complete system, not a broken version of a man's body. Chinese doctors going back over 2,000 years actually used the color, timing, and flow of a period as a health diagnostic tool. Chinese women used soft cloth pads made from silk or cotton, held in place with cloth belts, not far off from a modern reusable pad. In medieval Europe, most working women simply bled through thick wool skirts and dark fabric while continuing their daily labor, because stopping wasn't an option. Wealthier women used washable linen rags, and doctors at the time actually believed periods were the body cleansing itself, so if a period was late, they prescribe herbs to bring it on faster. Here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Almost none of this knowledge came from women's own voices. Nearly all of it was written down by men, and mostly from the outside looking in. Pliny's list of period superpowers tells us nothing real about what Roman women experienced. It only tells us what Roman men were afraid of and didn't understand. The actual practical knowledge, what really worked, what materials were best, how to manage pain, lived inside communities of women and was passed down mother to daughter, mostly by word of mouth. It was rarely written down, and that means an enormous amount of real women's history has simply been lost forever. So why does any of this matter now? Because the modern disposable pad you can grab at any shop is shockingly recent. The very first disposable pad was sold in 1888, but it flopped. Women were too embarrassed to buy it from a male shop clerk. It wasn't until the 1920s that pads finally became normal to buy, thanks to an advertising campaign that reframed periods as basic hygiene instead of something shameful. That means for the entire span of human history before that, cloth, wool, sponges, and plant fibers were the norm, and women managed just fine and lived full active lives the whole time. So next time someone acts weird about periods being an uncomfortable topic, you can remind them Cleopatra dealt with this, Roman women dealt with this, medieval peasants dealt with this, ancient priestesses dealt with this. This is genuinely one of the most universal human experiences that has ever existed, and for most of history, women simply figured it out, generation after generation, using whatever they had and quietly passed that knowledge forward. That's not a strange footnote in history, that's actual history, and it's about time it got treated that way. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what you think we should dig into next.